month of evolutionary spirituality. That's what we're talking about this month. I know. And I was going to say, I don't know what I'm talking about today. Truly. You know, I sort of let Spirit inspire me about what I'm going to be talking about. Some time in the past, I was coasting around thinking about it. And I was drawn to this pile of books.
I don't have enough tape.
All of which I haven't read. Thank you. So it goes by a lot of names, what I'm talking about today. Process new thought, evolutionary philosophy, process philosophy, spiral dynamics, integral enlightenment, integral theory, evolutionary mysticism. So I was in a class in ministerial school, and I was reading this book. Now, this book I have read, New Thought, A Practical American Spirituality. And one of the chapters was about process new thought, or evolutionary philosophy. And I was really taken with that. It touched my imagination. And I wrote a paper about it. And the teacher said to me that how can spirit be evolving? If spirit is whole, perfect, and complete, then how can spirit be evolving? And I knew right then that he didn't get it. So when we talk about evolutionary philosophy or new thought or process or whatever we're going to call it, it's not in the name. But according to these people, G. Allen Anderson and Deborah G. Whitehouse, they say that process philosophy is based on a few obvious facts. 5. The fact that the world is changing and developing, that everything is related to everything else, we live in little chunks of time and space. There's divine guiding intelligence that enters into our lives, and memories and other influences from the past also play important roles in contributing to what we are. So are you more clear about what we're talking about now? Now you all know this. You know it. You know it intuitively, and you know it in a very visceral way. Heraclides, who was pre-Socrates, around 500 BCE, was the first. And interestingly enough, they called him the weeping philosopher. Right away, I had a kinship with him. So Heraclides is famous for his insistence on an ever-present change in the universe. As stated in the famous saying, no man ever steps into the same river twice. That makes sense to us, doesn't it? Things are always changing. Nothing is static. We know that. We're process philosophers without even knowing. He also said that opposites are part of the same, that the path up and down are one and the same, all existing entities being characterized as pairs or contrary properties. So it's like color on a spectrum. There's black and there's white, and in between is the gray. We know that.
Right.
We're all practicing the philosophy. It's not so foreign to us. On some visceral level, we are all practicing process philosophy. Then Saint Anne Suman, who was a Benedictine monk and a philosopher and parallel of the church, who once held the office of Archbishop of Canterbury, said, he sets forth the argument for goodness in all things, which can only be thus through the presence of goodness itself. So in other words, we can only be good because there isn't a divine essence of goodness. We can only be what there is already expressed in the divine. We all know that. He argues that things are called good in a variety of ways and degrees, which would be impossible were there not some absolute standard and some good in itself, in which all relative good participates. Okay, now we're going to have a whole month of this. We are going to get this. Right? And I just am so excited about it. So here's what happened. There was this fellow, Alfred North Whitehead, who wrote Process and Reality, which is totally ununderstandable. Ununderstandable.
Uh-huh.
Aha.
That's an evolutionary work.
It'll catch up.
This is the corrected edition.
Correct.
So Alfred North Whitehead, he was an English mathematician,
Oh, God.
and then he turned to philosophy. So he was best known for the defining figure of the philosophic school known as process philosophy. So he's the guy that started all of this conversation. And it's found its application in a variety of disciplines, including ecology, theology, education, physics, biology, economics, and sociology, among other areas. Now, reminding you that we're talking about evolution, not Darwin-style evolution, but evolution of all things, change. Like we can't ever step into the same river. All things are changing, including God, the essence of all that is. So Whitehead argued that reality was fundamentally constructed by events rather than by substances, and that these events cannot be defined apart from their relationship to other events. In other words, we're all intertwined. This is the butterfly theory. I call it the Jell-O theory. That if I wiggle Jell-O here, it's going to wiggle Jell-O everywhere. That's process philosophy.
Yeah, see?
So, Whitehead referred to his metaphysical system as philosophy of organisms, but then it became widely known as process philosophy. Now, there was a fellow, Henry Nelson Wyman, who was perhaps the first and only, and maybe only person who ever read The Process of Reality. And he said this about Whitehead. He said,
Yeah.
not many people will read Whitehead's recent book in this generation. Not many will read it in any generation. But its influence will radiate through concentric circles of population until the common man or woman will think and work in the light of it, not knowing whence the light came. After a few decades of discussion and analysis, one will be able to understand it more readily than can now be done. So one guy has read Whitehead, one guy's understood it, and yet we all understand it on that visceral level. Because what he said is change is fundamental and inescapable. And all things flow. Now, why couldn't you have just said that? I could have gotten it. But the whole thing is we know it. We know it. We didn't need this erudite writing in literature to absolutely get it. That all things change, and we're part of it. We influence it. So then along came a fellow who, I can't see where I wrote it down, Charles Hartshorne. He was a contemporary of Whitehead, and I think he probably did read the book, but he said that in traditional or classical theism, God has been seen as the supreme unchanging being. But Hartshorne's process-based or neoclassical conception of God is seen, now get this, this is juicy. God is seen as supreme becoming. So God is not the supreme being, God is the supreme becoming, in which there is a factor of supreme being. So we all, as human beings, are beings, and we're becomings. Because God always becomes. And then along came Ken Wilber. He's a little more, I have read this too. We're a lot more in sync with Ken Wilber because he makes, he's still pretty intellectual, but we can get it. And his work is called Integrational Theory. And his whole concept seems that every entity and concept shares a dual role. Now this is juicy too. So this is the answer to my professor who said, if God is whole, perfect, and complete, then process philosophy cannot be true. And this is the answer to that statement, and it is that every entity and concept shares a dual role, being both an autonomous, self-reliant unit, a whole entity unto itself, and also a part of other wholes. So, here's the example. A cell is an organism, is both a whole as a cell, and also at the same time a part of the whole of a body. And likewise, a letter is a self-existent entity. A is an entity, and simultaneously an integral part of a word, which then is part of a sentence, which is part of a paragraph, which is part of a page, and part of a book. So we are all part of the universal whole in that way. And God can therefore be whole, perfect, and complete. So here's the deal. We all know this. We don't have to be intellectual. And we've got a whole month to figure it out. We all know that first, we are God in action. We are the arms and legs and mouth and words and thoughts and ideas of God. And as we move through the universe, as the unit that we are, our thoughts, our ideas, and our beliefs are part of the creation of that universal essence. God is becoming, and we're part of, we're influential in that becoming. That's exciting stuff. That's powerful stuff. We're not part of a static universe. We're part of an exciting, expansive, creative universe. And what we think is what God is thinking. Isn't that delicious? We're part of that essence that is unfolding. Now, all things evolve, and we've seen it happen. You know, there's the whole concept of Einstein said that the speed of light was the ultimate speed. Well, that law has changed. It's become more expansive. As we have learned more and had more thoughts about it, we discover that there is what we call non-local mind that immediately communicates across time and space. So that the speed of light is not static. It's not the only thing that light moves, or it is the ultimate speed. And at one time or other, we all believed in Newtonian physics. The whole world thought that was the way things moved, and that's the way things operated. And yet, as we became more interested, more creative, if we had more grand ideas, then what happened? Quantum physics became available to us. And now we're talking and looking at string theory. That there's not just one world, one consciousness, there's 13. Well, that's an arbitrary number too, because as we explore and as we discover and as we learn more, we'll find that the whole number of realities is infinite. But wow, we're doing it. So did these things exist before we thought of them? I don't know. I always think of it kind of like, maybe we just are rolling out the red carpet of ideas. We're creating the universe as we go along. We're making it up as we go along. And so because we can do that, the possibilities are endless, aren't they? They're limited only by our imagination. We're creating, you and me as units of the whole, we are creating the universe. That just dazzles me. So what does that mean for us? On a day-to-day basis, what does that mean for us? It means that, going back to the basic, what you think is what you get. What we think is what we get. And we're powerful beyond measure, limited only by our imaginations. I find that dazzling. So, I'd like to share with you a prayer. This is from Bruce Sanguin's book, If Darwin Prayed. Bruce Sanguin is I think a Lutheran minister in Canada. And his whole congregation is shifting to this whole concept of evolutionary spirituality. And so this is called, subtitled Prayers for Evolutionary Mystics. So before we pray together, I'd like to share this prayer with you. It's called Release into Grace. You, O Holy One, are the cathedral of love, inviting us to enter and rest in the sacred space of your being. You are the evolutionary urge sending us out beyond the safety of the sanctuary into the world to know you and as our own becoming. You are the measure of our lives, causing us to know the distance between our small gestures of love and the extravagance that is our destiny. You are the soothing voice reminding us that you are the lover and that we have loved enough. We release into the grace of being and becoming, knowing that you are the nameless one within both. We release into the grace of being and becoming, knowing that you are the nameless one within both. So I'd invite the practitioner and the minister to stand and help me hold the consciousness, the evolving consciousness, to hold us all in prayer in a creative way, knowing that we are powerful beyond measure. So I invite you to join with me as we settle into that space of expansive becoming. I invite you to join with me as I allow myself to sit in the place of power of all potential. I allow my spirit and soul and creativity and mind and body to feel the expansive possibilities of a limitless, ever-changing divinity. I allow myself to feel the power of my own creative urge. Knowing that I am without boundary. I am without limits. I allow myself to sit in the excited anticipation of that that is yet to be unfolded, to be revealed. And I sit in the PowerPoint of my own responsibility. To do my best, to do my part, to do my fair share of creating a world that I choose to live in. is loving and kind. So, in a sense of sweetness, a sense of excitement and anticipation, I celebrate my place in all that is becoming, all that can be. And I declare it good. I declare it very good. And I invite you to own it with me by saying, and so it is.